This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
You're listening to Beyond Bossfights, gaming conversations with interesting people. And now, here's your host, Raxwolf.
Hey, welcome to episode 14. Last year, we saw an upheaval in the gaming community in the form of Gamergate. Out of all of the muck and the mudslinging came some legitimate questions about journalism ethics and the maturity of the industry as a whole. To navigate these prickly issues, I have with me today prolific gaming blogger Justin Olivetti, who is perhaps best known for his work on Massively and the Massively Speaking podcast. Justin, or Sip as many know him by, gives us his take on the relationship between players, studios, and the press, and we discuss some of the good things to come out of the Ethics in Journalism Challenge. We also talk about the relationship between hobbyist bloggers and paid journalists, and whether that relationship is mutually beneficial. But first, you heard him on the Outtakes episode talking all about pie. Well, now he's back with a game review that left me in stitches. Today I have with me for the first time on the podcast Little Brax. And Little Brax is going to talk to us about one of the games that he's playing. Little Brax, what are the kids playing?
Lord of the Rings Online.
Lotro, huh? Well, as most people who listen know, Lotro is a game that my family as an entire unit plays. So, what is your character in Lotro?
He's a guardian.
What does that mean? Do you know?
Yeah, he guards stuff.
Is he elf?
No.
What'd you make?
I made a dwarf.
A dwarf? Are those your favorite kind? What do you like about dwarfs?
They have beards and they're kind of funny sometimes, and they say charge funny.
Yeah, they do. They say a lot of things in the game, don't they? Baruch Kazad. I Menu. Do you know how to speak Dwarvish?
No.
So what's your favorite part about Lord of the Rings Online so far?
I like the new winter outfit I just got.
Where'd you get that?
I kind of traded it from, for this armor, but I still had the armor.
Okay.
So I had that winter outfit too. It came with one set of thing of armor, like shoulder pads.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the fellowship.
What fellowship?
Fellowship, I don't know what kind of fellowship.
You mean with your brothers when you play together?
Yep.
So when you play with your brothers, what kind of stuff do you do?
I didn't really play quests with them. I just like messing around with them.
Do you? How do you do that?
Do the stuff like you say you're like the emotes when you're like you're looking through one. I like saying charge because it's kind of funny.
Oh, you like to do the emotes with your brothers? Did they do them back?
No, but they challenged me twice to fight him.
Mm-hmm.
One time, I did. And I totally lost.
Well, you're brand new to the game. That's not even fair.
I'm level 7.
And what level was he?
26.
Well, that's not very nice of your big brother to beat you up. So, if you could change one thing about Lord of the Rings Online, what would it be?
No fighting each other. Because it's totally not fair. If level 7 to level 100, that wouldn't be fair.
Not at all, would it? Have you played on the creep side at all? Do you ever creep? Monster play?
No.
No.
I want to make a monster play.
What kind of monster would you make?
A wolf.
Oh, a warg. Yeah, you can be a warg. That's pretty cool.
Or a spider.
Why would you want to be one of those?
They're kind of like dogs.
Okay. Spiders aren't.
Spiders are cool, though. Like Spider-Man!
I'm trying to think of any other questions.
I want to be a oink.
I'm trying to think of how to wrap this.
Oink against a droid. A droid would win with a giant axe.
You think so? What would you do if you were level 26 and your brother was level 7?
I would beat him up.
So today I have with me Justin Olivetti. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you taking some time out of your very busy schedule to talk to me today. And I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time because we're going to be talking about blogging and journalism, and I can think of nobody more qualified than yourself.
Oh, I can think of hundreds of people more qualified.
Before we get too far into the topic, though, would you mind giving my listening audience kind of a history of your gaming? Because a lot of people might know you from Massively, and they might have seen your work over there, but they might not know where you came from and where you started gaming and when you started gaming and all that stuff.
Sure. Well, my online alias is Sip, which a lot of people might know from my blog, biobreak.wordpress.com. I started blogging probably back around 2008 when Warhammer Online was starting to really rev up. It seemed pretty exciting. I had been thinking about getting into blogging for a while because, WoW blogging was big back then, but there were so many WoW bloggers. So I was kind of waiting for the next big thing, and Warhammer at the time looked like it. More fool I. But I got on the train like really early on, and then the whole blogging community exploded, the Warhammer blogging community, and it became probably one of the most interesting blogging phenomenons that I've ever witnessed, which was really cool. A lot of those bloggers, they're obviously not blogging about Warhammer these days, but they're still around, a lot of them. So we often call ourselves the class of Warhammer of 2008. So I blogged about Warhammer on my own for a while, got noticed by another site, I think it was like Game Radar, some weird site. It's no longer in existence, but they contacted me, said, hey, we'll pay you to bring your blog on our site. You can just keep on writing whatever you're writing. I'm like, fine, I'll do that. I don't care, It ended up being a really bad deal because their site looked horrible. Their blogging tools were not very robust, and I ended up only getting paid just peanuts. So at the end, I told them after a while, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm taking my blog back. And then I fell out of love with Warhammer, so I started up BioBreak to be more of a general gaming blog, which, rule of thumb, by the way, you're thinking about getting into blogging, don't do a one game specific gaming blog. Even if you're only playing one game at the time, don't nail yourself down, because I've seen way too many bloggers fall into that trap of, they're just blogging about this one game, and then one day they go, oh, no, I want to blog about something else.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
So at least give yourself a generic name. And anyways, so after a while, I had a lot of back and forth with, at the time, the editor-in-chief of Massively, Sean Schuster, who knew me. And he wanted to hire me on. It took a while for that to get going, but eventually he brought me on board, I think, in 2010. To be kind of a combination columnist, which is our opinion columns, kind of our game columns of the week, and also a news writer. So I've been doing that for 4.5 years now, and it's been awesome. It's we have kind of a new team. I think there's only about 2 or 3 of us since I came on board that are still there, but we have an awesome team. So it's really just a part-time job I do on the side, writing a lot of news and doing some fun columns like top 10 lists and music columns with Jukebox Heroes, and do some Lord of the Rings online reporting. And then I have my own site, and of course since you're one of our fellow TGEN podcasts, I help run Battle Bards with Sil and Steph, and we talk about MMO music, which is a weird niche topic, but we love it.
Now, that was a great definitive blogging and journalism history, but how about your gaming history? I'm not going to let you get away.
Oh, is that what you're asking? I don't know. I mean, do you want me to go back to the Atari 2600 when I cut my teeth back in 1982?
That's exactly where I started, on the 2600.
Yeah. All right, man. 2600 brothers. Yeah, that's what I grew up on, that and the IBM PC Junior, and we never had a Nintendo. My parents thought the Atari was sufficient. So we eventually waited out and got a Super Nintendo in 91, and I enjoyed that, the PlayStation, but I was always a computer gamer, and I love computer games, especially in the 90s. Did a lot of adventure games, role-playing games, and then college did not game much at all. Just was too busy. We didn't have much in terms of the internet back then. This was like the mid-90s, so we were only starting to get the internet. Had no idea, like never heard of MMOs until about 2000 when some of my friends got into EverQuest. And I thought, that sounds scary as crap. Like they were talking about being addicted so much that they were neglecting their wives. And I'm like, no, I don't think I'll be doing that. But after a while, I did kind of want to get into MMOs. I just was looking for the perfect one to jump in. A lot of them looked a little too demanding in terms of time, and just the difficulty curve was huge. So City of Heroes became the first big one I got involved with, and then World of Warcraft was just a wonderful get into the whole MMO scene. And at this point, I play like everything. So. It's I try to at least sample as many MMOs as possible for Massively, and also because it kills me that there are so many great games out there, and just the thought of just saying I'm only going to play one, I can't even wrap my mind around that.
I know at one time you actually had almost like a calendar schedule of which games you were going to play on what nights. Are you still sticking to that?
No, I've tried so many things. Right now, I'm more or less trying 5 or 6 MMOs, and that's not even counting a new one. I'm trying to test out H1Z1 this weekend. No, these days I just try to, I sit down at the end of the day and I have a couple hours of play, and I go, I'm going to just play 2 games tonight, and these are the 2 I'm going to play, and try to rotate through my stable. So.
Okay, this is a curiosity question for me. This wasn't on the list, but are you assigned certain games that you have to play, or does Massively give you a lot of leeway into?
Oh, we got a lot of leeway. Yeah, we're basically asked, what are you playing about? Do you want to write about it? So I used to, we did have a lot more game-specific columns. I did Lord of the Rings Online for a long time. Now it's a very sporadic feature. I've helped out with like The Secret World and a couple others, but most of the columns I chose to do are very flexible in terms of like my top 10 list. I can touch on any game I want, and that really plays well to my strength, which is a lot of sampling instead of really heavily diving into one game. But we have writers that are very heavy into one game, and that's all they want to talk about, and that's cool too. So I just know that in the past, you think you're going to write about one game, and you get really into it for about 4 months, and then you burn out hard. And then it's hard because then you're stuck with this column you should be writing, and you have to go to your boss going, I don't want to write this anymore because I don't like the game.
It's amazing how many podcasts are out there that only go to about 15 episodes, and then they're just done.
Or how many podcasts are about a game and they do like 100 episodes before the game launches and 10 after.
Yeah, exactly. I've noticed the same thing.
And that just cracks me the heck up.
Well, it sounds like you started out blogging for fun. You said blogging really took off. And then you got noticed by a site that it paid you little, but it paid you. It was professional media, quote unquote. Did you study journalism at all in school, or was this just something you did for fun and you picked up and you always had a natural talent for it?
I have an English degree, so I've always been a writer, and my mother's a professional writer as well. But it wasn't something I was specifically gearing toward. It never really crossed my mind that I wanted to go in games journalism. It was just an opportunity that came along. And I took it because I'm going to write about MMOs no matter what. And my thought is, I might as well get paid for it. if I'm honestly putting in the work for it, why not? But I still blog on the site. I still do BioBreak every day, and that's, I get nothing from that in terms of money, and I just do it because I'd be writing no matter what. I love to write, so it's really just like this fountain of interest that's pouring out of me. I love to write, and I love MMOs, and those two things coincide. So I write about that the most.
So as far as blogging versus professional paid journalism, I'm curious as to whether you think that these two things are filling different needs within the gaming community, or is it pretty much just two different sides of the same coin? Is it just non-professionals and professionals doing the same thing, or are they serving different audiences and different purposes?
That's a great question, and it's probably one of those things we could debate for a long time. We debate it even internally and massively. Half of the staff calls ourselves, we're journalists, and the other half of the staff says, no, we're hobbyist bloggers. Because it's how you see yourself. I think we fit the bill of journalism, but I definitely think there is a line at least on the Venn diagram, there's definitely an overlap. And in terms of what the purpose is, what we're trying to provide, information, entertainment, insight, expertise, all these things can be provided by bloggers and often are. I'm one of my columns at Massively that I lobbied to start it up, and I did several months ago. It's called Global Chat, and I wanted to highlight some of the excellent blog pieces that were out there on the blogosphere and get some people to check out what these bloggers are writing for free, and they're doing it doing such an excellent job of being informative and entertaining and thoughtful. But at the same time, blogging it's not really bound by ethics and by restrictions of, like an editor coming in and saying you can't talk about this, or you need to tighten this up. A lot of blogging is just, off the top of your head, doing whatever, talking about whatever you want to. It gives you more freedom to do that, but at the same time, it also doesn't give you as much credibility to stand on in terms of wanting to be taken seriously as a professional. So there are some very professional bloggers. There are some very non-professional journalists, quote unquote journalists. So, it's really in how somebody conducts themselves and their focus. A lot of times, people say, well, you're not a journalist because you have opinion pieces. And to which you got to say, well, look at any paper. Any newspaper has opinion pieces, and journalists write opinion pieces. It's just that, their opinion tends to be more informed, and they're very upfront. This is an opinion piece. This is a factual piece. This is an essay, and et cetera. So I think bloggers need to be out there. I think they do a great job, especially being a counterpoint to some of the stuffier things that get printed in games media. Sometimes games media we, not Massively, but we as a whole gaming media, have our hands tied on some topics. We can't really offer opinions on certain things. News comes out and we go, okay, we got to wait for an opinion piece. But, bloggers can instantly get their reaction out there and saying, I don't like this and this is why. And nobody's going to call them out on it, because there's nothing to call it. That's what they do. The freedom to express their viewpoint is very refreshing, and it's very much needed because it keeps. I know some people are very fond of saying, "Well, I don't trust anybody in the games media anymore. I just trust bloggers," which is fine. But I think that comes about because they see bloggers as being under less restraints than journalists, and.
Yeah, I think that I've heard the same thing, and I've heard people say that. I've seen it in my Twitter feed, but I have to, as a blogger myself, I have to think. But you have to be careful with that too, because there's really no, like you mentioned, there's no code of ethics necessarily that has to be followed by a blogger. There's no fact checking that's required. It's read and believe at your own risk at that point, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. I think there was a piece this past week I was debating with somebody else, and I thought it was a really good essay, and they said, well, look, this person has like 10 major errors in thinking, here, and here, and here. And so it was kind of interesting just going, well, this person wrote a really long essay, and sometimes there's like this fallacy of if somebody writes for a very long time, then they're making a really well reasoned argument, and you should take them more seriously because they're assaulting you with a wall of text. But that's not always necessarily true. I mean, people can blather on for a long time and be saying very little or very little intelligently.
Kind of an industry question as well. You say you have some of these internal discussions and debates at Massively. Do you think that hobbyist bloggers hurt the professional games journalism because people will defer to those sites instead, or do they actually help it by raising awareness of some of these issues?
Oh, I think they help. I mean, at Massively, we not only have a tip line, but we're always on the lookout for what bloggers are saying, because sometimes bloggers bring up excellent points in the news, and they'll bring up an issue that's going on that has, we've overlooked or we haven't seen. The other day we got a tip from a couple, sources that World of Warcraft was looking at possibly a free to play version, which is something we're keeping our eye on. MMO culture had some strings that kind of indicated possibly something was going on. But while we were getting the story ready, I noticed that a blogger, one of the bloggers, Superior Realities, had wrote a really nice piece on this and had kind of elaborated on some speculation, taking the information given and giving a very well-reasoned argument, which it turned out not to be the case, but it was a really good argument about how this could possibly play out. So we worked that into the post. We really like to give credit to bloggers that bring news to our attention or actually report on the news, which happens from time to time. Like they'll notice something's going on in the game, or they'll report on something in the forums, or even occasionally a firsthand experience, and they become the news, or they're our primary source on that story. So yeah, bloggers can definitely cross into journalism territory, and we have, at least for Massively, we have absolutely no problem giving them credit for it and respecting them for the work that they do. And we try really hard to source everything we do properly, and not to take somebody's words but not give them credit for it, which happens to us a lot. Which is, if it happens to you, it really kind of peeves you, because you're like, these are my words, these are my thoughts, and somebody else is just reposting them or taking credit for them. And
speaking of blogging, you are the granddaddy of the Newbie Blogger Initiative. This was your brainchild, correct?
Yeah.
Now, this is something that I participated in this last year. My gaming blog was pretty much brand shiny new about a year ago. And so I leveraged the collective of the newbie bloggers in order to make some connections and get some advice, hopefully dispense a little advice along the way as well. What was your inspiration for this? Why did you think that this was something that was needed or was going to be a good idea to put out into the community?
Well, it actually came from something even earlier, back when I talked about the Warhammer blogging days. Around December that year, December, January, February, when the game had just launched, and there were a lot of Warhammer bloggers out there, but we were aware that there were a lot of people who wanted to blog but felt very intimidated getting their feet in the pool. And since I had just gone through that period of reading blogs for a long time, thinking there's no way I could be anywhere near as good as these bloggers or nearly as prolific, I knew that, sometimes you just need encouragement. You need somebody to step up and say, you can do it. So several of us got together in the Warhammer days and said, let's run an initiative where we do a month where we pool together to encourage bloggers to come out, try their hand at blogging. We give them a huge boost of traffic that first month so that other people are aware of their blog, because, getting that initial readership is really tough. And I was actually, back in the Warhammer days, I was very underhanded with how I got my initial readership, which is I did what you're doing right now. I went to every other person I knew out there who was talking about Warhammer, and I did an interview with them and posted it on my site, because then they would link to me. and I would look like a jerk, and then suddenly people were aware of me. So,
By the way,
like,
not a bad strategy, by the way.
no, it's not, because people love talking about themselves. Look, I'm on a Friday night and I'm talking with Brax about myself. Yeah, so a few years later, it was very successful. By the way, we had a lot of new bloggers come out. A few years later, I thought kind of same thing, that I wanted to give back to the community. And I'm not always the best about commenting on people's blogs, about being supportive in a way that I should be. Usually it's just a time issue, but I wanted to give back. So I sent out an email to a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of bloggers. Everybody on my list said, listen, I kind of want to do this again, where I want to take a month and let's get a bunch of bloggers together who will not only give them traffic, but also mentor them, give them advice. Post at least one post that month where you give a new blogger advice. And it was really successful. I know we've had some wet blankets every time we've done the NBI, the Newbie Blogger Initiative, have come out and after a year gone, well, you only had 37% of the people who participated stuck around. And I kind of want to slap those people across the face, but because that's just such a rotten thing to say, because that's 37% of bloggers who haven't ever blogged before, and now they're blogging on a regular basis, and I think that's a win. But even if people have just tried it out for a month, so what? That's awesome. We had a fun time, and after the first year was a lot of work. I really enjoyed it. But I didn't have the time. Writing for Massively, doing my full-time job, taking care of my family, it eats up pretty much all of my time. And so when the next year came around, people asked me, "Are you doing it again?" I said, "No, I'm not, but feel free." And Roger of Contains Moderate Peril and somebody else, and
it was Dune from XP Chronicles.
Thank you.
Yep.
They asked if they could just take it over. I said, with my blessing, and they did a wonderful job. I would say they did a better job than I did by far of really getting the community involved, coordinating everything, keeping it going, and getting all these advice things going. And one of the things I like about this is because we've done this for a few years, there's a wealth of resources out there for getting advice if you want to go into blogging. And there's a lot of bloggers out there who will support you, who will not only mentor you, but be glad to say, hey, you're a new blogger. I'd love to feature you on my blog. I'd love to give you that boost of traffic so that people are aware of you and read your stuff. And at least for my part, I always try to add any new blogs I find onto my blog roll and try to throw them some love.
Yes,
so.
And we appreciate that. And I found it to be a very welcoming environment, which I think is great for a new blogger. I think it's been, like you said, there's some wet blankets, but the successes actually over time have started to really show up, I think. And the people that have continued with it are the ones that are now in charge of the community, quote unquote. They're mentoring others. I think you could probably pretty easily trace the podcast network that I'm on to the Newbie Blogger Initiative, because so many of the folks that are in it were involved in that, and that's where I met them. So, there's these things that are kind of springing out of it now, and things like this take time. You can't take 30 days and, all of a sudden you've got this huge successful blogging community. That's just a start. You got to kind of plant the seed, and then over time it starts to grow.
And I think that's a key word there. It is a community. It's a weird community of people who write, and we don't often agree. Sometimes we get into a lot of snippets with each other about certain topics, but I think there's actually a growing sense of community among us, not just from the NBI, but from other initiatives that people have taken on. Blogist, Syl just did one for the Christmas thing where she got a lot of bloggers to participate in that and talk about what they got out of community and MMOs. And it just makes people feel involved and together and, just supportive of each other instead of seeing each other as competition. We're not really competition at all. We're just part of a grand discussion. And some people I see saying that, blogging's dead or blogging's dying. And I just want to just shake my head at that and go, okay, even if I'm the last blogger, I'm still going to be blogging, A, and B, it's not dying. I mean, people drop out of blogging, but people come into the pool all the time. People come back, and it's great. I love it.
Has your involvement in professional games media changed how you interact with other gamers at all?
No, I don't really have like different masks, put on my Massively mask versus my blogger mask. Some people have joked I keep doing BioBreak so I can maintain my indie cool, my cred. I got to have my credibility. I've never been cool and I've never had credibility, so it's okay. No, I don't see myself at all above anybody else. I'm involved in activities with Massively, more professional stuff that, maybe the average gamer or blogger doesn't get, like going to press events, at PAX and whatnot. But really at the end of the day, we're all gamers. In fact, that's one of the things you realize when you work in games industry is everybody's a gamer. I mean, really, even the developers, you might have them on this gigantic pedestal, but you meet them and they're just as nerdy as you. And they honestly, pretty much all of them, generally just care about games. And they're not really out to get anybody. And they're not out to ruin your MMO. They're just out to make the best game they possibly can. And because they love playing games just like you love playing games. And so really, we're kind of all on the same side, even though, the public and the press and the developers are kind of all part of this triangle. There is a huge commonality that doesn't exist in other forms of journalism and other fields, and that's kind of awesome.
So this is also kind of from a professional standpoint, this next question. Have you noticed that writing about these games interferes with your ability to enjoy playing them?
Not on the level of like a developer who they're only thinking about how the sausage is made and they're always kind of breaking it down. Like a film critic, if you go to film criticisms, school and you get a degree and you know how movies are made to the point where as you're watching them, you're dissecting all the parts and pieces and you can't enjoy it as a whole. Some developers are like that. They really honestly can't. Bartle talks about that. He analyzes games, but he can't really ever enjoy them anymore. I'm not like that. So it doesn't interfere that way. It does interfere with the time because I have to write more than some days than I get to play, and that stinks when you should be playing the games so that you can write about them more, but you still need to keep writing. So it's really trying to find that balance. And there's been nights where I want a game and nope, I've got to finish this huge article that really needs to be done, and that's, it comes with the territory. It's, that's part of the job. So a lot of times people think that all games journalists do is just sit around and play TV and play games on their TV and stuff, and it's a wonderful life. They're just eating candy beans. Nope, you're doing a lot of writing, a lot more than the average gamer will. How
about from the standpoint of this is now an obligation instead of something I do for fun?
I very rarely felt like that. Once in a while, because I constantly have to keep writing for Massively. Yeah, once in a while I'll feel a little burned out. But I avoid that by padding. I write a lot in advance. I prep my columns weeks in advance so that if I have a bit of a slump, I can take a day or two off. And I'm okay. And usually that's all it takes. But sometimes, even writing can get really hard. And sometimes you have to push yourself to keep writing even though it's hard. And that's what sometimes when people get into blogging for the first time or try to write a book for the first time, they don't realize that it will get hard. And there will come at a point where it is sheer work to write the next paragraph. And you have to write that next paragraph. And you just do it because after a certain point, it starts coming easier again. It's like exercise, you start running or you start biking and there's that burn and all you want to do is stop because suddenly it's hard, but you push through that and it gets easier. So yeah, there's tough spots, but that's part of what, doing something good involves.
Yeah. Everybody experiences burnout who plays games at some point. And does it ever make you stop and think, when you're burned out on a game, say Lord of the Rings Online, because that's one we have in common. This is also a game that's 8 years old now, so there's not a lot of big sites covering a lot of Lord of the Rings Online stuff anymore. Do you ever stop and think, well, what's going to happen if I tell people that I'm burned out on this game? Is that going to have an adverse effect on my readership, on the community, or anything like that? Or do you just have to put that stuff out of your mind?
I used to worry about it a lot more, and I, especially when I don't want to use this in an egotistical way, but when I was a little more popular than I am now, I used to worry about it because I thought it would sway people for or against it, and then people would get mad at me, and just kind of that worrying about what other people think. And really, one of the cardinal rules of when you're writing, especially blogging, is just write for yourself, and just post stuff, and don't really overanalyze whether or not you think something's going to be well received. I mean, I've written stuff, and then I've just had to walk away from the computer for 2 days because people got so up in arms about certain columns or topics or whatever, and I didn't want to deal with it. I mean, I just wanted to post it and put it out there, and whether they liked it or not, I didn't care, but I wasn't going to dwell in the comments section and get my stomach twisted up in knots because they were mad at me for that. Mm-hmm. So on Massively, in terms of I stopped playing Lotro. Like, that's a good example. November 2014, I stopped playing Lotro. I just felt kind of burned out on it. I usually just walk away from games. That's one of the wonderful things about playing multiple games, multiple MMOs. Highly recommend it, because you get burned out on one, no problem. Just walk away. Play a different one. You get burned out on MMOs, walk away from them and read for a week. Do something else for a while. You'll end up coming back more often than not, and you'll feel refreshed, because we're not meant to indulge in a hobby so hardcore that that's all we do. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, some nights of the week I will have time to game, and I just won't. I will sit down and just read a book, and that's a good thing to do. But in terms of, like, when I left Lotro, I don't like posting the big "I quit, this is why the game sucks" kind of thing, because that ends up biting you in the butt when you come back. Every person who's ever blogged about WoW knows that. Yeah. You will do your big "I quit WoW," and then you'll sheepishly come back 3 years later. No, just tell people, hey, I'm just kind of burned out right now. There's some issues going on right now I don't like, but I had fun with the time I had with the game, and I'm just going to walk away, and it's cool. And it turns out, right now I'm back into Lotro and having a good time, but I'm not overdoing it. So I think people understand it. I think we got to give credit to people that they understand that you're just human.
We're going to shift gears just a little bit now, and you and I spoke about this a little bit before the show, because I wanted to kind of level set and make sure that you understood where the questions were coming from. I think that we have enough distance between ourselves now and the whole hashtag Gamergate ordeal that happened in 2014 that we can kind of take more of an introspective look on what went on there from a journalistic standpoint. And so that's what I want to do with the next couple questions. I don't want to get, inflammatory or accusationary or anything like that, but I think it's kind of interesting to look at what might have come out of that whole deal. Do you think there is an issue with ethics in gaming journalism? And was that a fair criticism to come out of the whole Gamergate thing?
Yeah, as we talked about before the show, I was so frustrated with Gamergate, because it really was a great example of how the internet loves to shout past each other. And both sides feeling that they were on their high and mighty horse, and they were championing some great cause, and they really weren't talking about the same things. They were talking about two very different issues. And I think the problem with the pro Gamergate thing is that it spawned from a very bad example that ended up not being a case of ethical corruption at all, and it ended up getting hitched to misogyny and all sorts of really bad stuff. But that aside, do we always need to examine ethics in gaming journalism? Oh yeah, we do. Absolutely. Get rid of Gamergate. Look back at like Dorito Gate. Look back at when GameSpot fired that guy for that Kane and Lynch review, because the whole ad thing, they cracked down, and the studio came back and said, we're going to pull our ads or whatever. It's really uncomfortable for a lot of people when they read a site that has their hands in the pockets of these studios, and people go, well, I'm supposed to get my information from you, but the studio's giving you all these incentives to give them the best review possible. So why should I trust you? I mean, that's why we need this barrier of very clear ethics when we write about games, and what our relationship is between the press and the studios, and the press and the readers, and the readers and the studios. So yeah, ethics need to be clearly stated. It's I don't want to like crow and say Massively is the best site ever, but let me say Massively has worked very hard from a long time ago to have high standards in journalism and ethics. It's something we've always been talking about behind the scenes. We're one of the very few MMO news sites that will not accept a paid junket to go fly off to a studio to get a hands-on tour, because we will not accept flights, we will not accept hotels, we will not accept gifts over $20 or anything like that. And these are things studios routinely do to try to get in sites to come in and give them positive reviews. And I even saw one. I'm not going to name the site, but it was this huge article where somebody was writing about a hands-on impression of a game, and they outright came out and said, the studio flew me to go see it, and they put me up in a hotel for 3 days, and they gave me this, but I'm just putting it out there so I'm not biased for this title. And I'm thinking, you just told us that you're totally, whether or not you're biased, you just told us that you accepted these gifts, and you've given us a really good reason to doubt the credibility of what you're writing. Mm-hmm. And as a reader, not as a journalist, but as a reader, when I go to a site, I have to be asking, like, can I trust the veracity of what's being told? Can I trust this person's opinion, or is it being tainted by? I mean, did you ever read like what's that GameStop magazine that they always try to get you to buy? Their own magazine. And I used to subscribe to that way back before, when I knew better, back in high school, back when I didn't realize it was being written by the store, and the store wants to sell games, so they're going to tell you every single game ever is the best.
Yeah.
You need sites, and I think we've seen a backlash in the journalist community of sites and journalists coming out and saying, we don't want to be tied to advertising this closely. Another thing about Massively, and it's totally okay to say this because we've said this before, we at Massively are removed from the ad team. What we write is not dictated to us by – I don't even have a clue who the ad people are. AOL handles all that separately. So the ad people – if you see an ad on our site for, say, EVE Online, it's not because Eve came to us one day and said, we'll give you ad money if you post a nice thing about our game. We had no idea that was going to happen. It's completely removed for us, so it takes the pressure off. We have absolutely no editorial pressure to give any game a positive or negative review. And in fact, we don't even do reviews because that's all tainted with the whole Metacritic thing, but that's a whole different discussion. So in short, yes, it's good that we're looking at ethics in gaming journalism. Gamersgate was probably not the best catalyst to do that, because it's made it kind of laughing stock where people are saying, well, it's all about ethics in game journalism, because it's not always about that. But it does need to be discussed, and it does need to be looked at, because whether or not a site's readership can trust that site to deliver accurate news and deliver opinions that are unbiased from studio money is important for the long-term health of the site. Other forms of ethics that need to be discussed are, like clickbaiting headlines, misleading quotes. It happens from time to time. You run a story and you don't, I have messed up. Rax. I have messed up. There's times where I've written a story and I've not completely, fully read and understood my source, and I will incorrectly state something, or I will take a wrong approach. I mean, just the tone of an article is important when you're writing, and any journalist knows you can tilt a reader's perception of what's being reported on by the tone that you deliver. I mean, if you're derisive about a game, then people go, even though you're not saying anything overt, that this game is bad, you're insinuating it's bad. So it's important to kind of, deliver clear-cut facts, even though at the same time you do kind of want to be entertaining and you don't want to be a robot reporting the news. So, you got to be ethical in a lot of different areas, and it's important. But at the same time, studios need to be ethical. And oh my goodness, I wish we could do a whole expose on some of the very unethical things that studios do. And we really can't get into that, at least not tonight, because it's, at the end of the day, it's about relationships. And yeah, there are things going on that I don't agree with in terms of the studios. Sometimes it's just people. Sometimes it's their policy. But at the end of the day, you do have to have relationships, and studios control a lot of the information that we have to report on. So
that's an interesting. I was going to get into this a little bit later, but since you brought it up, it's funny because when you look at journalism, the main function of journalism is to tell the truth, basically. If you want to boil everything down into one little ball of what you're supposed to be doing, that's what it is. You're supposed to be telling the truth to your readership. That seems to be sometimes on a competing... It seems to be a competing priority with the people that you interact with at the studios, because they're from public relations. And their goal is to control the type of information that gets out there and make sure that their game or their studio is looked at in a positive light. So they're essentially salesmen. Salespeople, there's the jokes are out there about salespeople and lawyers. Salesmen are out there to lie to you, basically, right? I mean, they will do anything possible to make the sale. How do you contend with that competing priority when they're trying to control the information that gets out there and you're trying to make sure that the truth is what gets out there?
Well, we have a couple cards in our deck. One of them is, because it's a back and forth relationship, there is some back and forth. I mean, if a studio completely abuses or blacklists a particular outlet, they also lose all coverage that they're going to get in the future from that outlet. So they want coverage. They want continuing coverage, and then that's the card in the journalist deck that, you can't be too mean to us. You can't, punish us because we said something bad about you this week, because maybe next week we're going to say something really good, and you want to continue that relationship. And at the same time, we can't just say unfair, untrue things about a studio, or only, go out to get only look for the bad things that a studio does, because then a studio is just going to stop wanting to have that relationship with the site whatsoever. So there needs to be some back and forth. But from the journalist side, yeah, it's a game. There are some people at studios that really, they're not involved with PR. They're, the developers, they want to just sit down and talk with you. I mean, a lot of developers, they truly do just want to sit down and talk about the game. They sometimes have a PR person in that room to rein them in, which is always kind of hilarious, because I can't tell you the number of interviews I've had where I've asked them questions and the dev happily answers it, and then the PR guy says, "No, you can't say that. you can't report on that.
You can't print that."
So there's like that. The PR statements that come out, and the sometimes the way that interviews work, where you send them questions and they send you back stuff, and you have to kind of cut through that. And look for what is the truth. What are the facts? Strip out the hyperbolic language that just comes. I mean, the PR language is just, it's silly, but after you've read it so many times, you just filter it out. And you just go, okay, they're reporting this. How, like, one example is how PR people always like to throw the biggest number possible at you to show you that their game is awesome. We've had 5,000 registered users. We've had 6 million created characters. I mean, it's always a different statistic, but it's the biggest number they possibly can dig up, because it makes them sound incredible. It makes them sound successful. And they're really hoping that studios will just print their PR statements verbatim. That's what a lot of PR people do, is they'll put out a release, they'll send it to you, and then they'll cross their fingers hoping that you just don't have time and you're just going to post the PR statement verbatim. And in which case, they get to control entirely what your outlet is saying. So even though it's a joke sometimes where people go, well, Justin, part of your job is just rewording PR statements. I go, okay, well, that's fair. Some of what I do is that. But what I hopefully do is I strip out the truth, and I take out the crappy PR language that it is just, it's just fluff. It's just making them look good for the sake of big words and happy, this is the most anticipated game ever. I'm like, if I've heard that so many times, and just presenting, this is what they're actually saying. This is what they can back up factually, and then perhaps providing some context. 6 million registered users, not necessarily players. We don't know whether or not this means, somebody who just signed up for the site, or, a lot of times we'll put these qualifiers in the articles because we want our readership to think analytically about these facts that they're being given. And we don't want to just be a PR person's spokespiece. We'll relay the information, but we're going to relay it as truthfully and as clearly as possible. And really, I mean, at the end of the day, you said truth. I think a lot of times about making my articles clear. They have to be clear, easy to understand. Taking an issue or taking, like 15 paragraphs of fluff and looking for the 2 or 3 the most important things that need to be relayed to the reader, and then giving them the readers that. And that's I don't know. I think that's an important job to be done. And I'm not trying to manipulate any of the readers. I want to give them the most important things, because I go back and read my articles and going, as a reader, is this what I wanted to know? Mm-hmm. And I hope I answered the question as yes.
This is a question that I guess I came to as thinking about some of the, how did we get to this point where journalists are accepting favors, and where journalists are sometimes getting pressured by their management to accept favors, and where studios think that this is appropriate to offer favors for favorable reviews. But it could apply really to any type of journalism. It doesn't have to be gaming journalism, because of the emergence of what I've quote unquote called in the show notes here, everyday journalists, people like me, bloggers, people who do podcasts, news podcasts, whatever else, anybody who has a voice. And really anybody can do this now, right?
Yeah, streams, YouTube, everything. Yeah.
Because of the emergence of this type of media, do you think that has created a more dangerous ethical environment? Because I'll fully admit I have no journalism training. I believe I have a strong sense of ethics, but that's not always the case for everybody. I think that I see some of these examples that are out there of people who have been busted accepting favors for favorable reviews, and they all, to me, seem like kids, right out of high school or college.
Yeah.
And it just makes me wonder if they've been hired out of the new media culture, I don't know what you want to call it, the like immediate gratification. Maybe they don't have the appropriate journalism training. Maybe they do, but they're just young, and because they've been so successful at a young age, they just don't have the life experience to know what non-disclosure and conflict of interest is and things like that. Do you think this creates a more dangerous journalistic environment from an ethical standpoint?
If they become big enough to be noticed by PR people and then manipulated by them without them knowing any better, then sure. And there have been cases of that. I don't think it's going to be, PR studios aren't out there like trying to get off onto every single blog in the world. But they also know that if you're sort of small potatoes and you get noticed by a studio or by a PR person, you kind of feel big for that moment, and you're much more willing to be favorable to what they want you to say or do. And so, yeah, these people, we all have to be careful. There's been examples of bloggers who have been asked to participate in PR stunts, like going back to Warhammer, Ware and I were talking about this earlier, about how Mythic did this whole blogger promotion where they were trying to promote their new Land of the Dead thing in Warhammer. So they sent out these clues to a bunch of different bloggers, and we all got to post on our blog, the piece of the puzzle. I don't think that was a bad thing to do. I don't think it was unethical to do. But, at the same time, there was like this eagerness we all had to like be noticed by the studio and being treated as professional. And it definitely wore down any caution we might have had against going, oh, what if they had asked us to do something, do or say something not good? There's been cases where I've seen little studios come up to, smaller studios like indie studios go up to bloggers and say, hey, would you, I'll give you a free copy of this game. Can you review it and give me a good review and I'll include your quote on the back of the box or something like that. And that's, okay, give me a free copy to review. That's fine. But there's got to be that line. Like, I'm not saying something favorable just so that I'll get my name on your box. Mm-hmm. So there's that line. Conversely, I mean, there's other unethical stuff we could talk about in terms of, journalism side again too. Where, what about the questions of when journalists or whatever you want, media outlets, when a media outlet brings on a game developer to write for them, to be a columnist for them, is that unethical? Because they're now on staff writing for that outlet while that outlet is reporting on that person's game. I mean, this is a clear conflict of interest, and yet I have seen it. I have seen it many times. I'm not going to name names, but you do not have to go far to find very clear examples of this. And, what about that? Nobody calls them out on that. It just drives me nuts.
That would seem to be a very clear conflict of interest. Yeah.
Yeah. But they get away with it because, hey, Hits, it's a big name. I'm not saying like you can't get somebody come on your outlet and pen an essay once in a while or do an interview with them, but to have a regular column and to actually have a place on the staff that's a completely different ball game. So I mean, you're tapping into a whole field of questions. And the long and the short of it is that gamers need to be very aware of some of these ethical gray areas and some of the very black and white issues. Journalists and media outlets need to be vigilant in holding themselves to a high standard. I think probably the one good thing that's come out of the whole Gamergate thing is that several sites have stated very publicly these are our journalistic standards and made it very public. Like, these are our ethics. This is the code of what we do and we do not do. And if there's, like, say we're reviewing a game and we have any sort of relationship with the people involved in the making of the game, we're going to state it outright. Or if we have accepted any sort of press junket, we will say that outright. I mean, these are things that should have been done, and I'm glad to see that sites are making an effort to be more transparent in that regard.
Okay, just a couple of things to bring everybody up to speed from the past month. Posted a post on my blog announcing that I was asked to become a co-host for MMORPG.com's Game On podcast twice a month. And I excitedly accepted that offer. It was from Lior, who is a member of the Gaming and Entertainment Network. She has a podcast called Cat Context. And her and I are going to be doing a Game On twice a month. Chris is going to continue to do the podcast the other 2 times a month, and he's also bringing on another co-host. So check out Game On, the MMORPG.com official podcast, when you get a chance. Something else, the podcast award nominations are now open. So by the time this releases, I think there's only going to be a couple of days left to nominate podcasts for the podcast awards. And they have different categories. They do have a gaming category, and that is over at podcastawards.com. The thing to keep in mind about the podcast award nominations is that you can only fill out the entire sheet once. Now, you can nominate multiple podcasts, one for each category that's on there, but you can only submit one sheet. So if you're going to nominate podcasts for a podcast award, make sure you've got all of them that you want to nominate in mind when you go to fill out the sheet so that you can fill them all out and just submit it once. I've included a link to the Beyond Boss Fight URL in the show notes if you are so inclined to nominate this podcast for a podcast award. This weekend I'm going to be participating in the very first, what we're calling T-Gen Tribunal, which is a roundtable discussion including a bunch of the members from the Gaming and Entertainment Network podcast network. We're going to be diving into a couple of different questions. There's going to be a bunch of us there, so I don't imagine we're going to have a lot of questions this first go around. Lior from Cat Context is going to be mediating that discussion, so we're going to go ahead and put it into the Cat Context feed. So if you're subscribed to that, you'll get that podcast in your Cat Context feed. Otherwise, keep an eye on my Twitter account, and I'll go ahead and tweet out the link for that podcast when it comes out. This month, the TGen featured network show is Couch Potatoes. Iz Lane and Jewel take a deep dive into a gaming topic every week. They'll also occasionally discuss idiots on the internet.
Hello, podcast listener. My name is Iz Lane, and I'm the host of Couch Potatoes. Joined by my co-host Jewel, we take an unfiltered look at the gaming world, featuring viewpoints and opinion from all corners of the globe. We talk about what we've been playing, news and social issues that surround the industry, make fun of idiots on the internet, and highlight folks from our blogging community. Couch Potatoes is a weekly podcast with new episodes releasing each Friday. You can find our show at couchpotatoes.libsyn.com. We are also a member of TGen, otherwise known as the Gaming and Entertainment Network, where you'll find a multitude of high-quality shows. TGen can be found at tgenetwork.net. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy gaming.
Just going to go through the feedback section real quick here, and then we'll close out. Had a couple pieces of feedback this past month, actually the past couple months, which is nice because we haven't had any for a while. First of all, we had an iTunes feedback from the Canadian version of iTunes from Frune Juice. He gave us 5 stars, and he said, Brax has cultivated a podcast that is more than just discussions about the latest games and updates. It spans topics a lot more related to gaming life balance that some people achieve and others of us need some help with, or just some reassurance that we're not alone. Beyond Bossfights does this. Thoughtful, fun, and relatable. A must-listen in my gaming podcast lists. Thanks, Frune Juice. Appreciate the review. Also got one just today on YouTube. I think this might be my first actual YouTube review. From Brethulian. I assume that's a Lotro name. That seems elvish. She said, Hi, I just found out about Beyond Bossfights, and I just wanted to say that I loved it. Heard the first episode and this one. She's referring to the second episode, which she commented on. And I kind of identify with both since I'm a female gamer in my late 30s. You'll recall the first episode was about will we outgrow gaming, and then episode 2 was about girls in gaming. So both of those topics resonated with her. You and your guests are great, and I'm looking forward to the next talks. Thank you, Brethulian. I am looking forward to hearing comments about what you think about the other episodes, because honestly, 1 and 2, I can't even hardly bring myself to listen to anymore. So.
Oh, yeah.
I think
nobody likes their own voice, right?
No, that happens. I've heard so many people say they can't listen to their first few episodes because they're just finding their way.
Right.
Just a reminder that you can send your feedback to braxwolf@gmail.com and I'll read it on the podcast. And remember that Beyond Bossfights is on iTunes and would appreciate your ratings and reviews. Beyond Bossfights is also on Stitcher and add it to your playlist. Those reviews do help us out, guys, but more than just getting us noticed. They keep us going. They put fuel in our tank, as I've said before. Podcasting can feel like shouting into the void sometimes, and it's great to interact with the folks that listen. Lastly, Beyond Bossfights now has a Nook forum on anook.com, so make sure to follow us there and start a conversation of your own. Justin, it's been a really fun conversation. I got to talk to you about a lot of things that I've been wondering a long time about journalism. I got a little bit of inside baseball on some of this, so I really appreciate you coming on.
No problem. I just have my narrow little slice of perspective, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who could probably speak in much more authority than I can. But it's fun to just talk about these things.
Would you mind giving out your contact information?
Sure. If you'd like to check out my blog, I'm at biobreak.wordpress.com. We also have a podcast here on the TGN network, BattleBars, and you can find that at battlebars.libsyn.com. Obviously, write it for massively.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at Sipster.
And as for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Braxwolf. That's BRAXWOLF. You can email me at braxwolf@gmail.com. I'm on anook.com/Braxwolf, Facebook and YouTube at those corresponding URLs /Braxwolf. And of course, you can always come and visit my blog, Gaming Conversations, over at braxwolf.com. Thanks, everybody.